Very warm welcome to all of you who are attending, and a special warm welcome to today's presenters. We have with us Emeritus Professor Veith from America, and we have Adjunct Professor, or rather Senior Lecturer, Mäkelä here from Tampere University, and as a moderator we have Anna-Riikka, who is a researcher here at Tampere University. Now, just a few short words about what the Veritas Forum is. As we know, Veritas is Latin for truth, but what is the Veritas Forum? It is Veritas Forums are university events which engage students and faculty in discussions about big questions in life. And the first Veritas Forum took place at Harvard in 1992, and now over 100 universities across the United States, Canada, and Europe are hosting annual forums. As a Christian agent, the Veritas Forum also wants to present or touch on a Christian view, not as an unchallengeable truth, but rather to put it to the test, along with the wide range of other worldviews. And we aim to create events that are relevant and engaging to people of all backgrounds, of all beliefs, and we need your help with this. And therefore, we have a very short 60-second or perhaps even 30-second survey card, and I would invite you to fill out the first part very quickly right now, just to get you started. And after the forum, we can fill out the rest on what you thought about today's topics and talks and so on, and if you have some good ideas for the future. And after the forum, you can leave the survey card at the back. There's a box, you can leave it there, and you'll leave the pencil there also. But more importantly, you're most welcome to join us for a cup of coffee right outside, or something very small and not sweet. We have some chocolates waiting, so you can stay and discuss more if you're interested. And yeah, I think that's it. My name is Marcus. I'm a student, and now I'd like to invite our moderator, Anna-Riikka, to continue on the topic of danger and power of stories. So the podium is yours.
Thank you. I'll first tell you about how this event is going to go. First, our presenters will give 20-minute presentations, and after that they will discuss the topics together, and then we'll have about 10-15 minutes for questions from the audience. So first I'll introduce our first speaker, Dr. Veith, who is a writer and a retired literature professor. He's Provost Emeritus at Patrick Henry College and Director of the Cranach Institute at Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He previously served as culture editor of World Magazine and Professor of English and Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences at Concordia University, Wisconsin. He was given an honorary doctorate from Concordia Theological Seminary in 2005 and from Concordia University, California in 2014. Dr. Veith has taught at Northeastern Oklahoma A&M College and was a visiting professor at Wheaton College, Gordon College and Regent College, Vancouver. He was also a visiting lecturer at the Estonian Institute of Humanities in Tallinn. Dr. Veith is the author of over 20 books, including Postmodern Times, A Christian Guide to Contemporary Thought and Culture, The Spirituality of the Cross, The Way of the First Evangelicals, Classical Education, and God at Work, Your Christian Vocation in All of Life. So, welcome.
So, thank you. It's good to be here. I'm greatly enjoying my time in Finland. When I go to another country, I like to read some works of literature from that country. And so I've been reading so now it's coming to Finland, I started reading an English translation of the Kaleva. And I'm loving it so much. It's wild fantasy, completely unpredictable. I usually can tell, epics and folk tales follow certain conventions. This one surprises me at every moment. And as I was thinking about this topic and reading the Kalevala, I was thinking that ancient tale is so relevant to our topic, the power and danger of stories. Here, the heroes don't fight with swords. They fight by singing stories at each other. And there's this wonderful moment or episode with Väinämöinen. Oh wait, forgive me for butchering your beautiful language. I'll do the best I can. But Väinämöinen is challenged by this young wizard who's boasting that he's the greatest wizard. And so they're going to have a big battle. And the battle is by singing stories. Now, the young wizard, Joukahainen, what do you say that? Joukahainen. His stories are so obvious. His stories are basically little scientific facts. He's boasting about what a great wizard he is, and he starts singing his story, and he sings things like, "Whitings live in quiet shallows. Salmon love the level bottoms." And Väinämöinen says, everybody knows that. Children know that. He says, and he tries to help him to tell a better story. He says, "Tell the story of creation. Tell me of the world's beginning. Tell me of the creatures in it, and philosophize a little." So then Joukahainen says, "Perches swim in every river. Iron rusts and rusting weakens." So Väinämöinen then starts telling his story. It's saying he bearded heroes that the children never heard of. An ancient story that no one knows. Something original, something unexpected. Saying he bearded heroes that the children never heard of. Evil times on race befallen. Singing about the problems in their world, the evil times. Grandly sang wise Väinämöinen, mountain cliffs were torn to pieces. All the ocean heard and tumbled. It's such a great story that the mountains are coming apart and the ocean is in a turmoil. It's such a powerful story that finally, lo, the boastful Joukahainen is transfixed in silent wonder. So even his opponent is transfixed in wonder at those stories. But then Väinämöinen keeps telling his story. Väinämöinen sings him into deeps of quicksand, to his belt in mud and water. He just sings and he tells the stories until the young wizard just sinks into the swamp. Now, today too, we're caught so much not just in a battle of ideas and controversies and discussions of our time, but a battle of stories. And each side in a controversy will have a narrative, a story that looms behind even the ideology that they're trying to promote. And the way people think about issues is often shaped by the story that defines them. And when you look at immigration, some assume a narrative that these immigrants are foreign invaders. They're coming into our country with their intolerant values and they're going to destroy our way of life. Because there's a whole narrative behind their arguments. Or you think of the immigrants as victims of war and hardship. They're coming here for a new life, who we should feel compassion for, and who deserve our help. Again, behind the different arguments is a story, and that's because we think not just with our reason, not just with our intellect, we think with our imagination. And our imaginations are very tied to every other part of us, including our beliefs and our imagination, or in our ideology and all the rest. And of course, it isn't just little issues that have a story, competing narratives. The big issues, the worldviews that people have, and they're again often contending. There's a story. Is the world a tragedy? People assume that it is. They see themselves as a tragic hero in a doomed life that ultimately will end in emptiness and despair. But it may be a kind of grandeur, the courage by which we enter. This is when you read the great tragedies of Shakespeare or Sophocles. People who see themselves kind of in that row. Of course, for Christians, the Bible, it's mostly stories. It's mostly narrative, not just theology. It's there. Poetry, it's there. But stories. And the great stories of the Bible can be so powerful in a person's life. The story of God becoming a human being, God becoming incarnate, taking into himself the evils and the griefs, the sorrows of the world, bringing redemption for them. Okay, that's a story. It's a powerful story. Now, does that mean that whoever tells the best stories has the power to influence everyone else? Well, kind of, but not exactly. And again, I see in the Kalevala the limits of stories and the misuse of stories. Now, there's Väinämöinen, and he's one of the main characters. There's another main character, Ilmarinen. And Väinämöinen creates by means of language. Ilmarinen is the magic blacksmith who creates out of material. And he can do things like make a model of an eagle that can fly, that can speak, that comes to life. Ilmarinen builds the sampo, this mysterious machine, really, that can make whatever you want. In this ancient story, we almost see technology and the possibilities of that option. You have the poet and the an engineer, so to speak. And here's another way of dealing with reality. Now, in the story, Väinämöinen and Ilmarinen are both going to woo this maiden of the rainbow. And Väinämöinen sailing this ship into this beautiful woman that he's trying to woo. Of course, he's over 700 years old and not quite so attractive to the maiden of the rainbow. But he's trying to deceive her. She says, "Well, who are you? Where are you going?" He says, "Oh, I'm just fishing." He's in this ship. And she says, "You're not fishing. If you were fishing, you would have nets and poles and things on your boat. Tell me the truth." And he keeps making up these stories that aren't real, that aren't true. And he said, "I'm going to war. If you're going to war, you'd have a lot more soldiers with you." And finally, she forces him to tell the truth. Now notice that he's using story to deceive her, but to her credit, she sees through them. And she isn't deceived. She ends up accepting the proposal of Ilmarinen. The engineers win again over the writers, but that's the way it sometimes still is. But we see too that a story can be true or false. And sometimes it's difficult to see which one, but with careful attention, one may be conform to reality in a way that others are not. But others are simply manipulative or attempts to impose the storyteller on someone else. There's another moment where the storyteller cannot just tell any story. The storyteller is not in complete control of the story that is being told. And we have that episode where Väinämöinen is building the ship that he's going to go to woo the maiden of the rainbow, and he's doing it so he's making a ship without touching anything with his hands. He's singing it into existence. Such a great storyteller. The wood is coming together and all the other things, but he comes to he's almost finished, and he forgets the words. There's 3 more words that he needs to say to make the last part of the ship, and he doesn't have the 3 words. It isn't just that he can create anything he wants. He's bound by what he can do, and by some real things that has to be in his story. So he goes on a big quest to try to find those 3 words. And he goes to this place and that place, asking this person and that person. And finally he goes to an old giant singer who's been dead for a long time, Vipunen. And Väinämöinen brings him back to life, and he's buried, and he comes back, and he's trying to get those, and somehow he falls into the mouth of this giant, and the giant swallows him. And he's burrowing into this giant, and he starts setting up a forge, and he's kind of tormenting this poor giant as he's working at it, trying to go inside and to find the secret, to find those 3 words. And finally, Vapunen tells them. I mean, this kind of reminds me of literary scholarship. And you're studying an author, you almost feel like you're swallowed by him. And you start working intensely inside the imagination of this author, kind of torturing him, kind of like I've done with the Kalevala, and trying to get it to give up its secrets. But finally, Vapunen does. And he sings the very oldest songs. He sings about Ukko, the creator of all things. And he finally on it hears this, and in this account of all things, it includes the three words, and he's able to escape out of his body and go in his ship. But that image of being swallowed, with a story, the author's imagination creates a story. When we read it or hear it or receive it, the author, and we're entering the mind of the author, or we're entering the imagination of the author. And the author is affecting us, maybe for good, maybe for bad, maybe in a positive way, maybe in dangerous ways. And that image being swallowed by the storyteller is kind of accurate. And it kind of shows how stories have this power. They become a way to understand someone else. When we hear their story, when we enter their minds vicariously by listening to that story, to see what it's like to have that worldview or that experience or be like that person. At the same time, it can, some stories can exploit us or degrade us or we make us less sensitive. Well, some can make us more sensitive. Some can make us more brutal. Some can make us more human. But in the power of stories, the key is to know how to be conscious of imaginative experience and to sort out what's beneficial from what is not.
Our next speaker is Dr. Mäkelä, who is a university lecturer in comparative literature and director of NARARE, Center for Interdisciplinary Narrative Studies here at the University of Tampere. Currently she is running two research projects, Voices Experience, Life Storying in Contemporary Media, and Dangerous Narrative, Contemporary Story Critical Narratology. She was visiting professor at Aarhus University, Aarhus University's Center for Fictionality Studies in 2014. In 2017, Dr. Mäkelä is the second vice president of the International Society of Narrative. She's co-editor of multiple books, including Narrative Theory, Literature and New Media. And she has published on consciousness representation, voice and realism across media, the literary tradition of adultery, authorial ethos, and the methodological exchange between classical, post-classical, and natural and cognitive narratology. Welcome, Dr. Mäkelä.
Thank you. And I've also supervised her thesis. That's quite nice. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
The organizers of this discussion want to know if a story can reveal the truth. As a narratologist who has studied both literary and non-literary stories for 18 years, I'm tempted to say that a story may very well be the very opposite of truth. But then again, it's obvious that the whole notion of truth is problematic, at least from the secular point of view that I'm representing in this discussion. So that's why I'd rather link this question with the concept of post-factuality. that has emerged in recent discussions on politics, media, and societal issues. For I'm quite convinced that storytelling and the very mechanisms of narrativity play a crucial role in this development. And what is more, this is actually related to Jesus and his well-known parables, stories that were all about the truth and not about the facts. Yet the stories that most shape the secular attitudes today, stories that shape our faith and doubt outside spiritual truths, so to speak, are not literary narratives or Disney fairy tales, but viral true stories in social media. In this short talk, I'd like to demonstrate how these viral true stories have become a secular equivalent to the parables of Jesus, and how this might not be a good thing. I'll give you 3 recent examples from the Finnish media. And by analyzing these examples, I hope to give some answers to the rest of the questions posed by the organizers, questions having to do with the rhetorical power and uses of storytelling. The first example is the case of the angel Elisa. From 2012, a story of a school bullying victim and her suicide that posed as a true story went viral and gave rise to a huge campaign and fundraising against school bullying, but was later revealed to be a mere fabulation by a relatively unknown fiction writer called Minttu Vettentera. She made money with this fraud, but legal charges were never pressed. But what really struck me as amazing was that even the public opinion seemed to forgive her because of her good cause. So we have a fiction writer who fabricates the suicidal diaries and the death of a schoolgirl. She fabricates the whole girl, as well as the voices of her devastated parents in interviews and social media. But in the public discussion, you can read comments like this in the slide. Be that as it may, but the ultimate cause here is awesome, meaning no more bullying. Or, Elisa's case is true, but even if it wasn't, school kids commit suicide because of school bullying anyway. So it seems that even though the story got falsified by what we nowadays would call fact-checking, this falsification did not affect the truth of the story. In fact, contemporary narrative theory may have an answer to this puzzle with storytelling and truths. According to a prevalent definition, a narrative is not so much a representation of course of events or causality, as the classical definition would go, as it is an answer to the question, what is it like to be a particular person in a particular situation? And the more devastating or shaking or overwhelming the situation, the better. The better is the story. So the truth of a story is essentially a truth about a personal experience. And what makes this particularly interesting is that it is practically impossible to prove someone's experience as they share it to be either true or false. You cannot falsify nor affirm another person's experience. And now if you consider, for example, Facebook prompt question, what's on your mind? You can see how the platform itself foregrounds the updaters. That is the teller's experience. And even if the experience you are sharing might be someone else's experience, your experience of someone else's experience, that is, someone like the angel Elisa. So the logic goes that even if the whole angel Elisa story is falsified, your initial emotional reaction to the story, no more bullying, remains intact. This logic also protected the author Vettentera during the media scandal when Angel Elisa fraud was uncovered, for the author herself had been a victim of school bullying. The cause was good, and the story of Elisa could have been true. In fact, even if the story wasn't true, people felt that it was representative. So when you share a story like this in social media, you don't share the facts about some topic. You share the emotional reaction. And moreover, as the recent talk about our social media bubbles suggests, not just any reaction, but the right kind of emotional reaction. But let me give you another example. This was a column written by a doctor named Tommi Koivu in a regional newspaper in 2015. He told a moving story about a guy called Joni who was diagnosed with Down syndrome. Joni was working in a supermarket as a grocery bagger, and one day he started writing little positive aphorisms and slipping them into the bags with people's groceries. Soon Joni became a star of the whole community. Everybody wanted to be on Joni's line, although that was by far the longest line, etc., etc. Really moving. Dr. Koivu wanted to share this true story to demonstrate the power of positive thinking in communities. The story was so touching that it went viral immediately, of course. But alas, it took only 2 hours for the social media activists to reveal the true source of Koivu's story, which happened to be this rather tacky American neoliberal self-help website called Life Lessons in Words. Dr. Koivu, here is how the story titled Johnny the Grocery Bagger ends. This is how the story ends in the website. A wonderful spirit of service spread throughout the entire store. And all because Johnny chose to make a difference. Johnny's idea wasn't nearly as innovative as it was loving. It came from his heart, it was real. That's what touched his customers, his peers, and those who read this story. Great service comes from the heart. Will you be a Johnny today? So as you can see, the moral of this American original was not so much about positive thinking as an inner force of an individual in a self-help sense, as it was about satisfying the customer and increasing the sale of merchandise. Yet this is how Koivu replied to his critics who accused him of presenting an American urban legend as a true Finnish story. This is a subsequent postscript to this column that he wrote. Of course, we can't be completely sure if Joni's story is true, but at least my naive heart, which believes in love, dreams and happy endings, wants to believe it's true. Now frankly, all this strikes me as quite amazing, especially because the profession of the writer is physician, and a fact-based profession if there ever was one. And also because the title for his series of columns is Suoraan silmiin, that is straight in the eye. Maybe the most powerful metaphor marking honesty and straightforwardness. But again, the explanation can be found in the experiential definition of narrative that indeed seems to dominate not only in narrative theory but also in our culture of storytelling. No matter if the events as well as the primary experiences of both Joni and his customers were fabricated, the viral story is about the teller's experience. And when we share Joni's story, we are in fact sharing Koivu's right-minded feelings about Joni's story. So never mind Joni, we want to share the good feeling that we get when we hear uplifting stories about the positive life attitudes of the disabled, and we want to learn from these stories. In fact, I'm not completely sure what we are learning exactly. Is it really enough nowadays to share the right attitude, the right spirit? Is it enough to like the right kind of stories? So cases like this have made me think that in fact this reactive logic with these emotional viral stories resembles the logic of the medieval and early modern exemplum. The didactic use of stories in pre-modern times did not differentiate between fact and fiction, or between report and invention, as the truth of the story was always founded upon the shared universal truths and maxims. The question with stories was not about referentiality, but about their moral. Fiction as an established mode of literature was established only later. And of course, the recycling of the parables of Jesus in the Gospels was an elementary part of this tradition of the example. Jesus wouldn't start his stories by saying that this happened to a guy I knew back in Nazareth. He didn't need to justify his stories by a reference to actual events, because the truth of the story lies in the religious doctrine. Now, what does all this have to do with contemporary storytelling? It seems to me that the logic of the example has made a comeback, but with an emotional, affective twist. The characters of Angel Elisa and Johnny the grocery bagger are exemplary, representative figures like the everyman in a medieval street play. It doesn't matter if they are actual or invented characters, they exemplify something that is beyond the individual. But evidently, we do not share the same firm early Christian and medieval foundation of doctrines and maxims in contemporary Western culture. So what do we share when we share these true stories in social media? I believe we share an unshakable faith in the relevance of individual experience. The contemporary viral example narrative does not set an example of righteous moral conduct, as it did in the parables of Jesus or in the pre-modern example, but instead it sets the example of a righteous emotional reaction. And here I think lies one of the most significant dangers of storytelling. It seems that in today's overcrowded media environments, where stories of individual experiences have pushed statistics and systemically collected data aside, we are ready to give individual experience both representativity and authority. My two previous examples have in a way been stories for a good cause, so to speak, and even concordant with traditional Christian values. But it's really crucial to notice that the same storytelling mechanisms that are used to convey positive humanist values can be used to breed distrust and injustice. This is actually what Jesus said. So my final example is likely to be as familiar to all the Finns as was the case of Angel Elisa. This one came from the mouth of the secretary of the Conservative Populist Party, True Finns, Riikka Slunga-Poutsalo, in an interview. First, she recounted a story of an immigrant who had been encouraged to live on welfare by government officials. And after telling the story, she just said, whether the story is true or not, that's another thing. This is how people experience things. That is, she was ready to accept this most likely made-up viral true story to back up actual political decisions concerning, for example, the residence and the financial support of refugees and immigrants in Finland. The problem is that often when we speak of the post-factual era or post-factual politics, we think of negative phenomena such as racism, while whitewashing the use of the very same mechanisms when they serve our own purposes. But the problems with the rhetorical and strategic use of all narratives are ultimately the same. How and when are we allowed to give representativity and authority to a story that by its very form rests on experientiality and particularity and individuality? So the awareness of all this going on made me establish a research project called The Dangers of Narrative Contemporary Story Critical Narratology. We are 6 in the project, and one of our central goals is to challenge the overly positive take on storytelling in both the academia and in society at large. We've been working on this only for 4 months, but I can already tell you that this is not going to be easy. And it seems to me that the biggest challenge here is that when you argue against the experiential and exemplary logic of storytelling, you are likely to go against the affective consensus. You are likely to be the wet blanket that gets thrown over an emotional sense of collectivity, in the internet especially. But to conclude, I'd like to answer the final question by the organizers that was about stories of faith and doubt that have had an impact on us. My immediate answer is, of course, the Book of Job. And precisely because it does what literary narratives do best. Instead of trying to convey a simple truth or a universal maxim, instead of trying to be unquestionably representative or authoritative, it's a highly ambivalent story that leaves more questions than it gives answers. And precisely as such, with all that ultimate inexplicability and its cruel and even arrogant, strange and inexplicable God, it is a true picture of human existence for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mäkelä. Now we'll have, I'd say, a 15-20 minute discussion. We'll have a 15-20 minute discussion between Drs. Veith and Mäkelä.
Well, thank you. It's very, very interesting and kind of exciting to me. It seems that the task or the dilemma of contemporary thought is the difficulty of dealing with anything outside the self, and you show so well the inner emotional, sentimental. It doesn't summon anyone to moral action, actually helping someone, as in the medieval exemplum, but a righteous emotion, and that takes the place of actually helping someone. And I think that's so such a great insight, and that I think is the moral life of so many people, simply feeling the right emotions and feeling very righteous and self-righteous about it. And again, the difference with the Jesus parables, referring in the parables also, like the Book of Job, are very hard to systematize, and they too have, it isn't just ambiguity, but a type of kind of mystery to them that evokes some kind of religious insight, but it's very much beyond the self. It's very much not what anyone expects who hears it or who reads it. And I think we take those for granted. But I think that's a challenge today in postmodern thought. Everything is a construction, it's an imaginative or cultural construction, and we can never really know anything outside of ourselves. We were at had another forum yesterday at the University of Helsinki, and talking about stories of faith and doubt, and Dr. Bacon, very insightful, pointed out that today even science becomes an issue of faith and doubt, that the concept of any kind of truth beyond the self is problematic, and that science creates models to account for evidence, and the models have to continually change. And so I was curious, you said that the whole concept of truth is problematic, the idea of we're in a post-factual world. We're in the United States and in the regime of our new president. You have the fake news, and people are almost like making up things and presenting them as real where they're completely imaginary. So I wonder, I'm just curious, is post-factuality inevitable because we really can't, because truth is inherently problematic, or is it possible to hold stories like this to some kind of objective standard of at least some correspondence to reality?
That's a really good question, and also thanks for your excellent talk and all the references to Kalevala. It was a pleasure. That's a really question with post-factuality. Is it inevitable? And in a way, in a sense that you just described, that we are so overwhelmed by all the information that we confront nowadays. So it seems that we are just, wrapping in, like just, we need this blanket and we want to wrap inside something, and this sense of collectivity that we have when we share stories and we like stories, it's like this warm blanket. And when I rip it away from them, they're like, don't take our stories. So it really seems to me that there is some sense of inevitability in the whole phenomenon, because we cannot handle all of the information, we cannot analyze it, we cannot internalize it, but we can internalize an experience, and we can share an experience, and we can just go and like, just in Facebook you can just like, and then you're somehow, it's all the actions that you do in social media is this kind of witness me kind of action, witness me being alive and part of a community. But that doesn't amount to actual action in the physical world. I wouldn't say that actions in social media are somehow fake actions or non-action. They are actions, but we also need action offline. and somehow these online bubbles and communities give us this warm hub and this sort of nest. And stories and sharing stories is one form of providing that shelter in a way. But also the level of narratives somehow, I would say that what was different with your talk and mine was that you made references to these ancient storytelling, oral storytelling cultures that where also Kalevala emerged. And those stories were not that much about personal experience. They are stories that explain how all this came up. And what I'm talking is a more modern version of storytelling. So there's a huge difference. And somebody would say that maybe after postmodernism, Lyotard wrote about postmodernism that it's a moment of the loss of the great stories, because we could see that the Western culture has failed in the big stories about success and wealth and health, and postmodernism was all about the deconstruction of those great success stories on a societal level and on a very high cultural level. And one consequence, according to Lyotard, was that we go back to those minor local narratives, and this would be one reaction to handle the loss of the big success narratives of the Western world.
Well, these social media, these stories present themselves as being true, that this is authentic, it's very personal emotion. As you say, no one can challenge something that you experience. And it turns out they're actually, the ones you cited are actually fictional. Does it matter if a work is clearly fictional, a novel or a film, it's obviously fictional. Does that does that have the same kind of danger, or does a fictionality make it possible to respond in a kind of a critical way where it doesn't have that same effect?
That's really good, because I would say that the modern canon, Western canon of the novel is all about problematizing the whole form of stories, narratives, and for example, I've written my own doctoral dissertation on adultery narratives, and one of the leitmotifs in adultery narratives in the Western canon is that you have this woman who reads too much and wants to narrativize her own life according to those romantic, novelistic ideals. So stories are not good for you. That's really the bottom line in adultery stories, and it's not about cheating your husband, it's about getting rid of the stories that will never come true, genuinely. So I think the whole criticism of story form and of narratives is written, it's intertwined in the Western canon. And my own examples, the earliest examples come from the 17th century French courtly novel. But obviously there are many earlier. Don Quixote is one of them.
I was just going to mention Don Quixote.
Yeah.
Yes, there's that great scene in Don Quixote, arguably the first novel ever, where the characters realize that they're characters in a novel, and they complain, the narrator gets it wrong, and so that's very self-conscious, almost postmodern fictional technique of Don Quixote, and sometimes they're complaining about their narrator, about the person who's telling the story, and which creates that sense that real human beings, we're the character, or the main character, central character in our own novel, and people wanting to emulate the novel and to live an exciting, glamorous life like the books that they like to read, and being unable to tell the difference between fictionality and reality. And your examples of the social media sort of shows that. On the social media, everyone has a forum, everyone has a printing press where they can sort of present themselves as a character and construct their own maybe fictional personality and fictional lives, and that just leads us further into confusion.
Absolutely. One wonderful term that describes this contemporary storytelling is storytelling on the go, which means that basically nowadays you might even be constructing a story before you are living one, because you can enter a situation in your life and you think, what would be a good update of the situation in Facebook, and then you live up to those narrative expectations. So, but this is obviously an old theme in the Western canon as well, because we've always had these story formulas in our minds that determine our actions, and we can be very self-reflective with those, or then again not. We can just be blind to those cultural models that we are obeying. But I would like to go back to Jesus, the parables of Jesus, because the point that you made about those was wonderful, that they leave this sense of mystery. So they are not as simplistic as many of the viral stories that go around nowadays and try to give us this exemplar of right kind of reactions, as was my argument. There is this sense of mystery. You just can't, read a parable from the Gospels and then like it. It doesn't work like that, okay, this was a good story, I'm for it, and I like it. It really invites you to internalize the whole thing and problematize something and feel guilty and it's good guilt, I'm sure. but the invitation is really different in them, and it's precisely because there is this ambivalence, and there is this, sometimes there can even be this lack of focus in a way that you're not completely sure what was, the crucial part, what was the crucial teaching or the crucial moment in this story. There is this certain blankness of style, this sort of like straightforwardness with which Jesus conveys these stories. And he doesn't frame them, and they just, he just blurs out a good story in the right place. Oh, what would you think about that?
Well, yes, let's see, let me think of an example. Just the fact that there's so much commentary. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a sower who goes out to sow, or a man who finds a treasure in a field. And some people try to interpret them, morally, and I've read objections. It's like a treasure in the field, and he buries it, and he sells everything he has to buy that field. And some people will say, oh, but that's not right. He should give the treasure to the person. He didn't say that he's stealing that treasure, and completely missing the point. Now, what is that point? Commentators, volumes, works, and sermons, and all these things that to try to get to the bottom of it. Yeah. But there's no bottom to it. Yeah. It's a revelation. Not that it has no meaning, but that it's kind of always sort of beyond us. The kingdom of heaven is hidden, that field. It's valuable. If we don't control it, it's worth everything in our lives to try to find that kingdom of heaven.
Absolutely. And in the Jewish Bible, it's the whole narration is based on the fact that everything is implicit. The whole style is based on the fact that everything, all intentions and all emotions and all that is implicit, and that's why the stories are so extremely intense. And I do feel, and I'm really an amateur here, but I do really feel that some of Jesus' parables, they have this same quality of this implicitness and this sort of the lack of point, in a way that you can actually debate about the point for thousands and thousands of years, and that's why they are also so productive in a way.
Yes, but again, it's so different biblical narrative. You have this story of Abraham going to sacrifice Isaac, and this incredibly tense and fraught and horrible situation, but the scripture doesn't talk about Abraham's feelings or Isaac's feelings. It's all underneath the surface, which creates the effect of this. I mean, when you read it, it pulls emotion maybe out of view, but it's not. Everything isn't brought to the surface. Everything isn't exposed. Everything isn't represented, and it's such a contrast to the emotional kind of sentimentality
Absolutely,
of
that
the social media
underline the experience and the emotional words and all that. It's there. They would be more effective, and it would be somehow more productive to internalize those stories if there would be more implicitness and more ambivalence in those stories. But can you immediately share a story that seems ambivalent to you? Because it's risky business to share stuff in social media. So you want to be sure that you share the right kind of stuff. So that's why you wouldn't share a story that is ambivalent, maybe. So it's the logic of sharing. The logic of sharing is different from the logic of telling.
It's just that metaphor of sharing, that term where you're it's not children letting someone else play with your toys, but it's an emotional sort of experience conveyed.
Yeah. Jean, you also had a really interesting example with immigrants and the sort of like the two stories that we might have when confronting with the immigrant crisis, and the other one suggests that the immigrants are invaders of our land and so on, and the other story would go that they are the victims. And that made me think of two very workable and good concepts: master narrative and counter narrative.
Okay.
Those are from social sciences, and I would say that in many cases we would have these culturally available narrative forms that are more appropriate in particular times and places, and they would maybe be the master narratives, the sort of like the dominant ways of telling about something. And I would say that in recent years we would have, as a dominant mode of telling about the immigrants, would be the victim story, because Finland, at least it used to be a very sophisticated and developed country, a wealthy country who wants to take global responsibility. So we would have this victim narrative as the master narrative.
Okay, yeah.
And I would say that the extreme right-wing movements would have a counter narrative to that would be the invader narrative. So the problem with stories is that I really do feel that it's easier to tell the counter narrative than the master narrative, which is quite controversial, but that's how it seems to work, that it's a story that comes from the margin and wants to move toward the center. That's a more tellable story. It's a more interesting story because it somehow violates the consensus. So it's a more tellable story to tell that no, we white males in Finland, we are the victims. So it's easier to tell that as a story than to retell the master narratives of the refugees really being the real victims here. So this is one of the dangers of storytelling.
I'm curious, in the case like that, you have two narratives, master narrative and the counter narrative, and so is there a way to mediate those? Which story is true? And again, that's hard to even say. I suppose it depends on all the assumptions and so on. But I'm curious how which of those stories can you say that one reflects reality better, or are we just stuck within our stories and we can't get beyond it?
I really do think that we should, when deciding on policies, we should go beyond narratives. We shouldn't just vote for narratives. Yeah. We should definitely go beyond narratives. Narratives are not the answer to when you want to make policies. Well, when you really want to do political decisions that have really far-fetching consequences, then you really have to be able to go beyond narratives, because we wouldn't help if we are just told narratives and if we are just shown pictures that narrativize, for example, animals. Only nice-looking animals, like furry, sweet animals would get, that we would want to protect them from extinction, for example, and all the ugly brown animals at the bottom of the sea would just be forgotten. So that's why we have to have systems that are blind to narratives and experiences and emotions, and that also goes with social justice, because if you the internet was so full of these emotional stories of politicians before the election that we had here, communal election here in Finland. All the politicians wanted to tell about their encounters with these exemplary poor people and people with alcohol problems and so on. But they were always like this really exemplary in a very nice way, these people's representatives. But you should also help the violent and the horrible people who have problems.
So,
and that's why we have to have the system that is really blind to all those.
Right, so what would that look like? What would be a system of, especially in a post-factual world, would it be statistics and evidence and facts?
Social democracy.
And is there, can that
Nordic
be
social democracy.
Can that have a rhetorical, can that be presented in a rhetorical way that would persuade people in our...
That's really tricky, and that also goes with the question of science being just stories, because many of the sciences are really not stories, and one of the biggest problems right now is that climate change, we are unable to tell stories about the climate change, because the climate change doesn't have an individual experiencer. It has no human scale. That's really the problem, because if you don't have human scale, if you cannot even construct an individual human experiencer at the center of the phenomenon, you cannot narrativize it. And when you don't narrativize it, people just tend to forget. And they don't know how to internalize the issue. So that's one.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we'll need to start soon. Take questions from the audience. But if Jean has a comment to what Maria just said.
No, that's fine.
All right. Okay. So we'll have about 20 minutes for questions from the audience to our speakers. So please go on. I will ask you to keep your questions short and to the point, so it's easier for our presenters to answer. I don't think we have a portable microphone here, so...
Yeah, but there's really good acoustics here, I'm sure that will hear.
Okay. So, please. Right. Yes, go on.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for a really interesting discussion and a wonderful new point of view into discussing reality through stories rather than through natural sciences. I think it's a worthwhile exploration. Now, I'm sorry, I have to just a few seconds more to get to my point. Just a background. I've been studying in the area of New Testament studies, the parables of Jesus. That's where I've been doing my doctoral research. And one of the points that seems to appear from those studies is that people who listen to Jesus' parables sort of naturally grasp that they are fictional stories, parables, that they have some content that really doesn't fit into reality. You don't have, for example, a sword who saws all the seeds all around the place. There's much more planned on good soil, not on rock and everywhere. So something strange is going on there. So the listeners learned. They had some kind of insight in culture from which they could learn to distinguish between a story that was talking about reality and a story that wasn't claimed to be real in a historical sense. And so my question comes to this, that how have we ended up, since you are both, it seems to be quite critical of this concept of true story and our experience and how it relates to reality, how have we ended up in a situation when we the minds are trained more to tell stories that confirm reality rather than telling stories that are conform to reality? And how do we then train people to get a mindset that is more, tries to distinguish these kind of issues, true story, bad story, story that contains true values and still can be history, or a fictional story which still talks about reality? what do we need to do? Because I mean, the basic point seems to me that if you just go with facts, people say I don't like them. I keep my personal story. It doesn't work with only going forward with facts. I mean, that's the postmodern reaction against modernism. Basic, I mean, hard facts, cold facts. Who does like them? So how do we train people to learn to adapt to these more to reality rather than to make reality out of one's experience in form of story?
That's a really good question. Thank you very much. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to
go first?
Okay. So, thank you. One question for narrative theorists would be that should we be telling different kind of narratives that confirm to the reality? Would that be a suggestion that we would need to, as scientists, for example, that we should, try to come up with story formulas that make people, no?
You are asking me?
Yeah.
No, my point is that you have this free example of where you tell basically historical false story as true story simply because the end justifies the means. It's a good sort of moral in the story. And my question is, how have we ended in a situation where people have this kind of function? Because if we go back to the time of Jesus, people evidently make a distinction between what the parable was saying about reality. It's a story, it's a parable, it's not a true story. They make a distinction, they could still see the point, the moral sort of
Okay.
And how then do we get, is there any ways to train people? Train the mind, because the problem is, as I said, you have facts, you have hard facts. If you don't like them, just keep your story, and that's perhaps not what we want to do.
Yeah, that's really a tricky question. I wouldn't have a training program for people's minds at the moment. We would like to provide one in Dangers of Narrative team, but I'm afraid we are unable to do that. But what we are training people to look at is the dangers of narrative form per se. But the problem that you described, that people are actually able to reject facts and just hold on to their own story. I do think that problem has something to do with the problem of authority in social media, because we have, I'm studying voices in social media and how they resemble the voices in fiction when you describe someone's inner self and feelings. So my point is to study social media voices as consciousness representation in a way. And those voices in social media, they are in constant battle, and they are not just battling against each other, but they are battling to gain authority. Because when you enter social media as one individual voice, you have no authority whatsoever. So you have to negotiate the authority for your own voice. And I would say that this overwhelming power of stories and storytelling nowadays has to do with this lack of authority, and then you have to seek authority through your own experience, and that's why we have ended up here. So it's a fight over authority, and I'm also, in my studies, I found these three functions in the use of voice in social media: authoritative and representative and experiential. And I think these three functions are battling in social media. You can tell a story like this happened to me and I've been there, and that would be the experiential way of gaining authority. And then you can go, I as the mother of two in this in Finland, and that would be a representative voice through representation of group of people. But then you can also have this authoritative voice, which is typically stripped out of all kinds of references to the individual, so that you really want to sound like a Wikipedia. You have those discussions a lot. I would say typically male, but I wouldn't know. And I would say that that you can see that those voices are struggling for authority through these functions, because none of them have natural authority. But when Jesus tells a parable to his audience, he has natural authority. So that's different, at least. And I wouldn't know how to train, but we are trying to work on that. I promise.
Right. I don't know the solution, but it just shows so dramatically that people today are kind of in a prison of themselves and in their inner life, and it's very hard for them to break out of that. I don't know the solution, but it's very helpful to be conscious of the problem. Maybe in teaching, to teach the problem, to teach the fact that people today tend to be so fixated on themselves, trapped in themselves, becoming their own authority, maybe recovering the authority of Jesus for Christians in a real way could help with a different kind of understanding of language and a different way of relating to the world outside themselves. But I'm not sure what the solution is.
Yeah. One difference with Jesus' audience and the audience of social media is that I guess I wouldn't know, but I guess that all the stories were based on the assumption that people are sharing the same, I don't know, bottom level of values, and then some general shared notion of his teachings. And they would have this frame of reference, this frame of interpretation in their minds when they listen to the parable. But the internet community, the people wouldn't have anything like that, this shared frame of reference. They have to build it through liking and through sharing. So it's the framework is just the platform. The platform produces sort of like the framework. It's not there like already there, and then you go on liking and sharing. You build it actively by liking and sharing, and then when you spend some time in social media, you learn what the frameworks are, how people have developed those particular frameworks, and when you violate them, you get punished.
Okay, do we have more questions? Yes, please.
I'd like to ask Mäkelä about, you said something about the ambivalence of the Book of Job. Just out of curiosity, I'd like to know, why do you think that it's ambivalent? You said something that you think it's highly ambivalent. Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is gonna be so amateurish, but I do know something about the tradition of studying the Book of Job, and it's treated as one of the most literary stories, and the ultimate inexplicability of God's actions in the story would be the ambivalence for me, and that's why it's also so awfully tempting for a person like me who really doesn't know who's up there and who's guiding us.
I think she was. You go first. Yes, please. Yeah, go on.
Hey, my name is Romy, and I'd like to ask you a question about the subjectivity of the narrative. So, like in terms of postmodern worldview, everything is subjective, right? Mm-hmm. And then you also said the narrative should be based on like human experience, and it has to bring about some kind of emotional sympathy. subjectivity, right? But what I'm thinking here is that like, what if the human experience in this case is pretty subjective and like, let's say you're sharing like social media, but if the narratives can be also pretty subjective, then how can it bring some kind of objective result in the end while it is really subjective? Like for example, in America, like this might be kind of racist, but like let's say like some white police killed a black guy, and then people kind of sympathize with the story, saying that oh god, those white police killed that poor kid, poor black kid. But while there are also hundreds or thousands of police being killed by guns by other people, it can be completely biased in some sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So what I'm trying to say is do narratives always bring about something objective? Can it be always true?
Oh, that's really a tricky question. I thank you. I think I tried to address precisely that problem in my talk, that in social media environments, the subjective story starts to gain representativeness when people share it. It's so easy to share a simple story that has a simple hero and or victim or villain. It's easy to share that because there's no ambivalence, and then you can share it and be a nice guy yourself. So, but when you share it, it starts to gain representativeness because it represents your feelings about the issue. And when some story gets enough representativeness, it starts to gain authority.
But it doesn't necessarily be true.
No. That's really the point, that it doesn't have to be true. And my point was that even if that story got falsified, somebody would do fact-checking and tell that this thing never ever happened. Then you could still go, but this could be true, this could have happened, these things happen, and our reaction was justified. And our reaction was real, and it was representative, and you can even draw normative conclusions out of that. And all that was originated by a lie. So that's the logic that I was trying to address in my talk.
But that kind of emotional reaction that wasn't initiated by the actual fact.
No. But obviously in these kind of viral true stories, the original reaction somehow it needs the idea of referentiality, that you maybe at least you want to believe it to be true. And you can even justify a story to be true because it's representative. If you see a rape narrative and rapist is an immigrant in Finland, you would say that okay, this must be true because these things happen. So that the train goes the other way, that it's representative from the extreme right-wing populist and racist point of view, then it must be true because it's representative. Yeah.
Yes, I want to just some points first. You are not the first person who were questioning the canon of the Bible, the doctrines of the church, and I think that to my mind, then you start to research the history of the first Christian church as global movement, then you will find out that they didn't really have the Bible as we have it today. Some small churches, they were just around the Syria and Egypt and in Galilee, and there was really small churches, and by some reason in the 2nd or 3rd century they've chosen the same texts. They told they are holy They're inspired by the Holy Ghost. So the experience of the church is not subjective, it's common, it's objective. And there were no social media then. So you see that it was no chance for them to communicate really in the sense we do understand it today. And then the second point is that nowadays Christians are on the three dimension, or they are Orthodox Christian and Catholics and Protestant. So, but we do all have the same holy text of the Bible as far as you study in the controversial comparative literature. You can compare the texts. You will find out that the texts that we use in Russian or Orthodox Church, or in America, or here in Finland, you will, if you will compare the texts, you will find out that they're just completely the same. So, which means that the experience of the church is common. So, and no dogmas of the church. If you are familiar with the term like consensus patrum, it means the same point of view was shared by all church fathers all together. So that's what is dogma. And the point that it's not from the text. The faith is not from the text. Faith comes first, and then the text. So that's why it's quite irrelevant to put at the same level the narratives and the faith.
Yeah. You must be addressing me, right? With this question. Yes. So my point was never to draw parallels between contemporary storytelling in social media and the formation of the Christian church or Christian religion. And I had no intention to criticize any of the Christian doctrines that are really intertwined with the value systems that I live in myself. So I really don't get the point here. I do see that there is this interesting parallel between the social media community and the building of consensus there, and the way that the early Christians were able to build a consensus on different texts and so on. But I'm not sure what the point is.
I can put it just that how many stories do you have that telling you about the incarnated God Himself coming on the earth as a human and dying on the cross and resurrected on the third day? No stories, but only the Bible. Right?
Yes, that must be right, but now I'm not sure what I should answer. Maybe some other question.
I'm sorry, but I don't think we have any more time for questions. Because we need to wrap this up. But I think we'll have a little bit time for you to talk to Jean and Maria after this. When we'll have coffee and all that. So I think now Markus will come here and close the event.
Yes, thank you very much for attending. Thank you for a very invigorating discussion. And like you said, we can continue discussing by a cup of coffee, and you can come and ask personally. There's more room for explore issues there. And just as a reminder, remember to fill out the form. Also, as a sort of extra thing on the form, if you feel that there is a subject that should be handled in the Emeritus forum in some way in the future, then you can write it on the back and say that this would be a really good idea. I'd like to, find out more about this. And as a sort of brief mention, on the 17th of May at 12:20 up at the university, or we'll gather at the university chapel upstairs and go eat somewhere, and we'll start, thinking about next autumn's Emeritus forum. If you're interested in this, feel very much welcome to come and join us and discuss what should we be doing next autumn. Or if you're just interested in this in general, you can just come talk to me also. But yes, this is very briefly the idea. So I thank you very much to the presenters. I thank you very much for attending, and I think we can end in a round of applause.